Hello everybody, and welcome to another Surge Media video. Today I'm basically going to be talking about and discussing reviving in Apex and the best legends for reviving in Apex. So, let me clarify when I'm talking about reviving. What I mean is the ability for your character's gadgets and abilities to assist in the reviving action. So I am not talking about the ability to get to your teammate and revive them. I'm specifically talking about the ability to assist in you actually reviving your teammate. Um, so I will explain more about that in a little bit as we go through the legends, but hopefully we understand and we're on the same page that when I say the best revivers, I mean the best characters for being able to revive in Apex Legends. So let's start off with F tier. I categorize F tier by characters that basically literally do nothing in terms of actually helping you with the revive. Their gadget basically does nothing, and I'll explain what I mean by that in a second, but this is the bottom of the barrel. If you're trying to revive your teammates, you do not want to go these characters. This sounds kind of weird because it implies that you're going characters specifically to revive, but if there are situations where you would rather have somebody else revive, you would have that person revive, if that makes sense, right? So, at the very, very, very bottom, we have Pathfinder. Pathfinder is not going to help you with reviving whatsoever. He has his zip line, which you can't use when you're downed, so the zip line does basically nothing. And his grapple gun, which, again, doesn't do anything. It's not like you can grapple your teammates and get them out of cover and then revive them. I think that actually might be a thing on Apex Legends Mobile, but on the full game, that is not a thing. So Pathfinder is not going to be able to assist with reviving on the main game of Apex Legends. Therefore, he is at the very, very bottom. Right above him, not very far behind, is Loba, who is basically just as bad. Loba, obviously, she has her bracelet, which you can use to get to your teammates more easily, but obviously that doesn't help with the actual act of reviving, so completely useless. And her black market boutique, the whole point is for you to be able to grab loot from it, and your teammates can't grab loot when they're down, and even if they could, that would not help with reviving them. So, as you can kind of tell, her kit and Pathfinder's kit basically do absolutely nothing in terms of actually assisting in the revive, except with Loba, you can use the Black Market Boutique and block off a doorway, thus making it harder for enemies to actually make it into a building, assuming that you're in a building. So you have to be in a building, and you have to have basically one entrance, and you have to use the Black Market Boutique for the sole purpose of blocking the entrance to make it slightly harder for the enemies to get in. Because they can still get in, they can still easily destroy both the door and the Black Market Boutique. It's not like either of them do damage, so it'll slow them down just a tiny bit, but other than that, Loba is completely useless. I'm assuming you could do the same with Pathfinder, but you would get very similar results. So Pathfinder and Loba, for that reason, are at the very, very bottom. Next up, we have D tier characters. Their abilities can kind of somewhat help with the ability to revive in very specific circumstances, but otherwise you would rather use somebody else. But you can find yourself actually using your gadget in the ability to assist a revive more often than F tier. That's why they're above F tier. So, at the bottom of D tier, we have Valkyrie. Valkyrie, obviously, as you know, her ultimate is going to do absolutely nothing because your teammates, while they are downed, cannot go into the Skyward Dive. And even if they could, if they could, actually, that would be pretty useful. You could get your teammates away, but obviously, it doesn't matter because they can't. And her passive with the jetpack is, again, it makes it easier for you to get to your teammates and revive them, but it doesn't actually assist with the reviving at all. The only reason why she's not in F tier is because she has her tactical, which is the missile swarm, and the missile swarm can, in very specific circumstances, make it easier for you to actually pull off a revive. The reason why is because you can use the missile swarm and then go for the revive, and if you're lucky, the missile swarm will stun the enemies. And obviously, if you are stunned, it is a lot harder for you to attack an enemy. So, as long as you actually get the missile swarm off and it hits enemies, then yeah, you're using your gadget, your ability to make it harder for the enemies to stop you from reviving. Again, this is very situational, but it is more than what the F tier characters can do, and thus that is why she is at the bottom of D tier. Next up is Bloodhound, who actually is pretty useful when it comes to reviving, but at the end of the day, it will not help you with reviving. So with Bloodhound, with the ultimate, you have the ability to basically see through smoke and have a red outline on enemies. And this is actually kind of useful because if you have the red outlines, it makes it somewhat easier to see if enemies are coming. So if you are going for the revive and then an enemy is coming, you can more easily see that that enemy is coming thanks to the red outline. Obviously, that's not much more useful than just using your eyes and seeing the enemies, but in certain lighting conditions, having the red outline there can make it somewhat easier to tell that, hey, an enemy is coming, I better stop the revive. That won't actually help you with the revive process itself, but at the very least, it'll make it more likely that you will not get killed while you are actually reviving. And as for the tactical, you can use your scan, and it scans through walls, which is pretty useful because you can do your scan and then go for the revive with some level of confidence that there's no enemies nearby. The downside, obviously, is that if there are enemies nearby, then that's not going to help you with the revive, because now the enemies that previously didn't know that you were there, or might have not known, maybe they still did, but the enemies that might not have known that you were there now definitely know that you were there. And if you try and go for the revive then that is basically a sacrifice. That is basically suicide, is what I meant to say. Um, you basically screwed yourself. But if there are situations where you're not sure if there's enemies nearby, being able to use your scan to confirm that there are no enemies nearby gives you a certain level of confidence that, hey, I can revive this teammate and not have to worry about canceling it, or just the ability to scan in a certain direction and then look in a different direction to see if enemies are going to start attacking from a different direction while I'm going for the revive. Um, like I said, it won't help you if enemies do start coming and attacking, but at the very least, it gives you a little bit more confidence while reviving. Next up, we have Mad Maggie, who actually is pretty good in terms of reviving, but the only problem is that it's very situational. So with Mad Maggie, you have the riot drill, and the riot drill can drill a hole into surfaces and do damage to enemies on the other side. So if you're inside of a building and you are either behind a door or just behind a wall in general, you can use the riot drill, and that will deter enemies from wanting to go inside. Obviously, it will not stop them by any means, so they very well might just not care because it doesn't do a whole bunch of damage. But if the enemy is low on health, or if they don't have line of sight of you and they don't know that you're reviving, then the riot drill can be a useful tool to prevent them from going inside. But again, you have to be indoors. Same situation with the ultimate, which is the Wrecking Ball. The Wrecking Ball is actually a very decently useful tool to stopping the enemies from wanting to push you, because you throw the Wrecking Ball inside of a building or inside of a small room, it's going to absolutely wreak havoc. It might even down them, it'll do a lot of damage, and it's just a lot of noise and confusion, and that extra noise and confusion makes it harder for the enemies to hear that you're going for the revive. And even if they know even if they know that you are going for the revive, the Wrecking Ball just existing and bouncing all over the place and doing damage will make it substantially harder for them to actually push you and stop you from reviving. The reason why she is still in D tier despite all of that is because, as I mentioned, you have to be indoors. If you are outside, then this Wrecking Ball is going to do absolutely nothing for you. Same with the Riot Drill. So, since you have to be in a very specific scenario in order for her utility to actually be useful, that is why she is in D tier. And at the very top of D tier, we have Octane. Again, uh, ignore the again. As far as Octane goes, his tactical doesn't do anything for helping you with reviving. Going faster isn't going to help with the reviving process. Again, as I mentioned multiple times before, it'll make it slightly easier for you to get to your teammate to revive them, but it will not actually help with the reviving process. But the reason why he is not in F tier is because he has the jump pad. And genuinely speaking, the jump pad is actually a pretty decent tool to help with reviving because you can throw down the jump pad and have your teammates go onto the jump pad and get out of there. So obviously, if you're in a very precarious situation or in a dangerous situation, and you just need a move, like you need to move, whether or not the enemy, or whether or not you're like down outside of the ring and you need to get into the ring, or whatever the case may be, you can use the jump pad, and your teammates can use the jump pad to make it to a safer position. Um, More, with a higher guarantee that you'll actually be able to pull the revive off. The problem is that it's loud and they can see exactly where you're going. So you're kind of exposing yourself in a certain way, but in very specific scenarios, being able to have your teammates just get out of that area can come in quite handy, which is why he is in D tier. Now, we have C tier. I categorize C tier by characters that have abilities that will make it harder for enemies to counter your reviving, but generally not that great. You would rather have, like, certain other characters, obviously. But they are more useful than D tier, but not quite, really good revivers. So, at the bottom of C tier, we have Crypto. Now, you might be surprised about Crypto, like, how is Crypto even remotely a good reviver? And he is only a decent reviver in the mere fact that you can throw down his drone anywhere, and his drone will alert you of enemies actually coming. And you'll know exactly where they are. The reason why this is better than Bloodhound is because with Bloodhound, you have to do the scan beforehand. You can't do the scan while you're reviving. And in terms of the ultimate for Bloodhound, you won't be able to see enemies in advance. You'll only see the enemies after they started pushing you. With Crypto, if you're in a room or in a building and you don't know where the enemies are coming from, and they could come from basically anywhere, you can throw down your Crypto drone, have it face a specific direction, go for the revive, and if the enemies ever try and push you, then you will know in advance that the enemies are coming. This is not a scenario where, oh, the enemies are looking at you and you're going to get shot and that is going to stop the revive. No, with Crypto, you can throw down the drone and know exactly when the enemies are coming and exactly where they are while you're going for the revive, which is actually pretty handy. Obviously, the big downside of Crypto is that you have to do all of this stuff before you actually get the revive. It takes quite a lot of time and setup, and that is very valuable time and setup. And considering time with the setup, and considering that you have a down teammate and that the enemy team knows that their teammate is down, this can be very precarious. But if you are able to successfully place your Crypto drone in a really good spot, or if you already have that Crypto drone in a particular spot in advance, then guess what? Being able to have a early warning sign of enemies approaching is actually pretty handy. uh, Next up in C tier, we have Horizon. Horizon has actually a decent selection of abilities at her disposal. First off, you have her tactical, which is like the anti-gravitational. I don't even know what it's called. It's like an anti-gravitational rift of sorts that pushes you up into the air. This is actually pretty decent because it makes it easier for your teammates to get up into higher positions. If for whatever reason you want to throw down your gravitational rift and have your teammate get on top of the roof of a building or, just up in a higher elevation, then her tactical allows you to do that. Another really useful part of her tactical is her ultimate, which is a giant gravitational sphere that will suck in enemies. So, say, for example, if you're in a building or in a room and the enemies are coming, you can throw down your gravitational rift. I apologize, I don't know the name of these things, but you can throw down her ultimate, and enemies that are trying to push you will get sucked into the ultimate, making it quite a bit easier to get the revive off. The only reason why she's not higher up on the list is because the her ultimate is only a one-way thing, as in you have to throw it a specific direction. If the enemies come in from a different direction, then it won't help, or if they have abilities that allow them to get out of the ultimate, then obviously the ultimate won't do you very much good. And as far as our tactical goes, there are very limited amounts of circumstances where being up into a higher elevation is actually an advantage. Especially considering that if the enemies are looking at you, then they'll know that there is a down person up there right now. They'll have a better idea, in fact, of where exactly you are. But obviously, that could still come in handy, just being able to move into a unsuspected location, assuming that the timing is right or the situation is right. So just being able to have that extra option with Horizon is pretty handy. Fuse. Fuse is basically has the same upsides as Horizon, in that you can make it more difficult for the enemies to attack you while you're going for the revive. So first off, you have his cluster charge or cluster grenade, and simply just throwing that in a general direction, it does damage, which is a pretty decent way of preventing enemies from wanting to attack you, especially if they're at low health. The reason why this is better than the riot drill is because you can do this anywhere. It doesn't just have to be inside of a building. It doesn't just have to be inside of a closed area. It doesn't even have to be anywhere near cover. You can just do it out in the open, and that'll make it harder for the enemies to push you while you're going for the revive. Um, Obviously, this is not, you obviously ideally wouldn't be reviving out in the open, but just to have that extra ability on top of it being very useful for being indoors is what makes Fuse better than Mad Maggie for reviving. Not only that, but his ultimate, which is the Ring of Fire, is actually really decently good for reviving as long as you're not too close to it. So if you're indoors and you're not too close to it, it is basically a no touch zone. Nobody is going to be really running through that, and if they do, they will pay a hefty price because it does quite a lot of damage. And even if you aren't indoors, it still is actually pretty useful. You can either use the Ring of Fire on top of you to make it harder for the enemies to get to you, and it'll slow them down or it'll just do damage to them and might kill them. Or you can put it in front of you where the enemies are, and it'll either slow them down or they'll take damage and die from the fire, which obviously will make it quite substantially easier to pull off the revive because they're so distracted by all of the fire that's going next to them. So because both his tactical and his ultimate are more widely applicable in terms of usages for pulling off a revive, that is why Fuse is in the second slot of C tier. No, third slot. Sorry, third slot of C tier. Next up, we have Revenant. Revenant is not going to help too much with the revive, but it will make the revive more efficient. So with Revenant, you obviously have his tactical. Sorry. With Revenant, you obviously have his tactical, which is silence, and if you have a if you're in a enclosed area with a room, or if the enemies are going to have to go down a predictable path, then you can throw down your silence grenades, and they will stay there after you throw them. And if the enemies run into it, then they will be silenced and they will take 10 damage, meaning they can't use their abilities against you. Of course, being able to silence the enemies to pull off a revive is only useful in a very limited set of circumstances. But what really sets Revenant above the rest is that he has his ultimate, which is the Death Totem, which is actually, I think it's pretty underrated in terms of how good it is for reviving, because it allows you to basically safely pull off the revive, at least safely for the reviver, which is Revenant. Because you can throw down the Death Totem wherever you are, go in, go for the revive, and you don't have to worry about dying because you'll just be sent back to the Death Totem. If enemies do come in and shoot you, guess what? You're not going to die. Your teammate might die, and that sucks, and that's why he's not higher up on the list. But at the very least, you don't die. And that is actually pretty significant because being able to go and get a revive basically risk-free is actually pretty useful. Now, obviously, like I said, the reason why he isn't higher is because if you use the death totem, go for the revive, and it's a botched revive, and your teammate dies, that is a huge blow. That sucks. But at the end of the day, it's still more useful than if you went in there by yourself as a human and went for the revive and you died instead. So instead of both of you dying, only one of you dies. So, like I said, being able to go for a revive using the death totem makes it at least safer for the reviver. Which, yeah. Last but not least for C tier, we have Seer. So with Seer, you have the exhibit. I'm not even going to really talk about his tactical. His tactical can't be used while reviving, so it's kind of a redundant point. But his ultimate is particularly good for reviving. You can throw down his exhibit, and within a large radius, you can see if enemies are pushing you. So it's basically like crypto, but instead of having to set it all up in advance and hope that they come in from a specific angle, you can just throw down your exhibit, go for the revive. If they push you, you will know with 100% certainty in advance that, hey, they are pushing you. You know, you can stop the revive and kill them. It makes getting the revive off quite a bit safer. Now, the reason why he isn't higher, obviously, is because A, it's his ultimate, he doesn't have it very often, uh, but more importantly, B, this isn't going to actually stop them from reviving, or sorry, stop them from killing you while you're reviving. Uh, they still know that you're down, and they're still going to try and push you, but at the very least, you will have better confidence in your ability to know if they're pushing you, and they'll, you know, you can stop and attack them, and maybe go into this back and forth. At the very least, you have that extra knowledge that they don't, and that kind of puts you at a slight advantage, or at least, you know, a better advantage than it does if you had any of the characters that are below. But if they don't care and they go guns blazing and they don't care if you see them, then obviously Seer isn't going to really help you with the revive in that case. Next up, B tier. These are characters that make reviving quite a bit safer, but are still more risky than A tier. So mostly what we were focusing on in the past is stopping the enemies from attacking you or slowing down the enemies from attacking you while you are going for the revive, or just making it overall a little bit harder for them to counter you. Kind of the same thing. I kind of repeated myself. Moving on from B tier though, these are characters that are actively going to make it genuinely safer for you to pull off the revive. At the bottom of B tier, we have Rampart. The reason why Rampart is actually a really good reviver is because all you need to do is just place down your deployable cover, your amped cover, I think is what it's called, and you actually have a pretty decent chance of being able to pull off the revive. The reason why it's not higher is because you're not covered from all angles. If you don't have all of your walls, then you won't be able to use all of your walls, because you have to have a certain amount of walls. I mean, you could just use one wall, and then you'll be safe from one direction, which is, you know, pretty handy. While you're placing the wall, you will still be vulnerable, though, but that's besides the point. So, yeah, you can place down your walls and then go for a revive. Obviously, they can still shoot through the walls and they can destroy the walls, and if they have explosives, then it's not going to help at all. But, yeah, that amp cover is actually pretty good in terms of stopping the enemies from attacking you, because even if they know exactly where you are and they're shooting at you, being able to have those walls as cover is actually pretty useful. Right above Rampart is Watson. Now, in certain circumstances, Rampart is actually better than Watson, straight up, because with the walls, you can block off from theoretically all different angles and make it very, very safe for revives as long as they don't have grenades. But that's where Watson comes in, because Watson has the interception pylon, which means that she can destroy any and all grenades. So a very common strat that people like to do is they'll like to get behind cover and go for revive, and a very common counter to that is to just throw grenades. And it's actually a pretty useful counter, because the grenades can go above cover and detonate behind the cover and kill the enemies. I do it all the time. Well, guess what? Watson says no to all of those grenades. So they straight up just can't throw grenades at you, which is genuinely actually really useful and really handy when it comes to reviving, especially if you're indoors and they don't have an angle at you. Instead of them being able to just spam grenades inside of the room until you die, the interception pylon will make it so that that is going to be much more difficult. Not only that, but Watson also has the fence gates, which you can use to block off entryways. So, say for example, you're again inside of a building, you can throw down your interception pylons. Nope, sorry, you can throw down your fence gates. I think it's called like nodes or whatever. I'm going to call them fence gates, though. You could throw down your fence gates at the entrances, and it'll make it substantially harder for the enemies to come in. And if they do come in, they'll take a bunch of damage. So A, you'll know that they're coming, and B, they'll have taken damage from it. So it's actually quite a bit of a decent deterrent from stopping enemies from attacking you. Of course, this is very limited, though. The reason why she's not higher is because it's limited, because A, you have to set up the walls in advance, or they have to be pre-placed. Obviously that'll make it so that it'll either take extra time or take extra preparation in order for that revive to make sense. And you also have to be in very specific certain areas. You can't just be out in the open, throwing down your fence gates and going for the revive. You have the fence gates there to, you have to have the doors there, and you have to, funnel the enemies through very specific choke points in order for the fence gates to actually do anything. So that is why she is pretty decently high up there, but not quite at the top. Next up, we have Mirage. This is the first character where their passive is actually relevant to their ability to revive. And not much else part of the kit is going to help here. But the passive is actually pretty damn good for reviving, because as you know, when you are Mirage and you go for a revive, both of you are invisible. I mean, it sounds overpowered, but obviously it's not, because you can hear the revive going off. And you can even hear the Mirage cloak going off, so you'll know, oh, he's cloaked. And he's not perfectly 100% invisible. You can still slightly see, like, I think the blue lines on his collar. So you're not actually perfectly invisible. Thus, it's still pretty risky to go for a revive if the enemies are pushing you. But if you are in a certain circumstance where reviving is somewhat safe, either you have teammates covering you, or you are kind of like in an area where the enemies don't really exactly know where you are, then being able to go for the revive while both of you being completely invisible absolutely can come in clutch. I have actually had situations where we won the round because, or at least we survived that encounter because I was revived by Mirage and they were looking for where I was getting revived and they didn't know exactly where I was because of the invisibility. The reason why he's not higher up, as I mentioned, is because they can still hear the revive, they can still see the blue lights, and that is it. That's all that Mirage can do in terms of the revive. His ultimate and his tactical don't really help in terms of reviving whatsoever, unless if you consider distracting the enemy by throwing down a Mirage decoy helpful. It might be, but that's very situational. But obviously, the going invisible for the revive actually is pretty useful. Last but not least, for B tier, we have Ash. Ash is actually pretty good for reviving, kind of on the same level as Wraith. I mean, Wraith is literally the next character. But I will explain why Wraith is better than Ash. So for Ash, you have two things going for you for the revive. You have the arc snares, which will slow down enemies. It does. So you throw down the arc snare, it'll tether the enemy, it'll trap them, it'll slow them down, it'll just straight up make it harder for them to push you while you're going for the revive. That can come in handy in certain circumstances, but it's kind of situational. But what really makes Ash really strong for reviving is I think it's called Rift Tear or whatever. It's your ultimate. Basically, you make a one-way portal, and it allows your teammates, even your down teammates, to go through the portal and get to a safer position. One big downside is that you have to be next to your teammate in order for that to work. So you have to actively, as Ash, go up to your teammate with whatever consequences that may incur, and then make your portal. Sometimes that's not going to be a problem, but sometimes that can put you in a worse circumstance. So for the case of Ash, being able to make a portal up, one-way portal up anywhere, can absolutely come in clutch. You can get your teammate to a much safer location much more easily and much more discreetly um, than with Octane, for example. And it'll make it more, like I said, it'll just make it overall easier for you to pull off the revive. Um, and the plus with the arc snare, that is why she is at the very top of B tier. Next up, we have A tier. A tier characters are characters whose abilities make it very difficult to counter the revive and are helpful in a wide variety of situations. So these aren't very situational. These are characters who very often you're going to be able to use your gadget to pull off a revive very safely. But still not quite S tier. S tier characters are kind of on a league of their own. But yeah, these characters are really, really good for reviving if it makes sense to give them a golden backpack. So, at the bottom of A tier, we have Wraith. And the reason why Wraith is better than Ash, sorry, I've had to think of the name of the character. The reason why Wraith is better than Ash is because she has her tactical. Her tactical makes it so that you are basically completely immune to damage. So what that basically means is, as a Wraith, you can place down your portal, run up to your teammate, and then go invisible or go become invulnerable, place down your portal, both of you go to the portal, and now both of you are safe. Obviously, the enemies can still come through the portal, but being able to have that portal there and being able to more safely pull off the revive in a more discreet location is what makes Wraith so good. Is the fact, again, there is a lot less risk involved in you actually pulling off your ultimate because you have the tactical. If Wraith didn't have her tactical, Ash would be better. Because with Ash, you don't have to have a preparation, like if you just so happen to be close to your teammate. Because the situation with Wraith is that if you're already next to your teammate and your teammate goes down, then having the Wraith portal isn't going to really help much. Whereas with Ash, you can just make a portal, both of you can go in right then and there. But with Wraith, you don't have to be next to your teammate. You can be decently far away from your teammate, and then you can make your teammate safe. Regardless of where you are, you can make your teammate safe, which is why Wraith is better than Ash. But, and like I said, also because of the tactical, you can go invulnerable, and that makes it substantially less risky for you to go for placing the portal and then go for the revive on the other side of wherever you put the portal, hopefully in a safe spot. Obviously, enemies can go through your portal, but you'll know that in advance, and overall, it's still safer because you'll theoretically be behind cover, as long as you play it smart. Next up, we have Bangalore. Uh, I was debating on where I was going to put Bangalore because, truth be told, there is a lot of counters to Bangalore, but I still have to put her pretty high up on the list. She's still going to be an A tier. With Bangalore, obviously, you have her tactical, which is really good for reviving. Straight up, it's pretty good. You have the giant clouds of smoke. They are really big, and they cover a large area. You can use them indoors. You can use them outdoors. And it allows you to go for revive. And even if the enemies know that you're in the smoke, unless if they have digital threat or a bloodhound or some kind of scanning abilities, they're not going to know exactly where you are. In fact, they might not even know that you're going for the revive, and it allows you to get the revive off as long as the enemies aren't too close. Now, the reason why Bloodhound isn't superb in terms of reviving is because if the enemies are close, if they're in the smoke, or, like I said, if they have the Bloodhound or the digital threats, then going for the revive can actually kind of backfire a little bit, because it'll make it harder for you to see where the enemies are, unless if you also have a digital threat. But it'll make it harder for you to see that the enemies are coming in. But just as a basically get out of jail free card, if your teammate is downed and the enemies are decently far enough away, then you should be able to relatively safely get off the revive without having to worry about them executing you, basically. And generally speaking, if you're downed, regardless of which character you choose, if you're getting downed and the enemy is really close proximity, no matter who you are, you can struggle. But in this case, with Bangalore, you would struggle a bit more because, you're not really defense. You don't have a lot of defense. Next up, we have Caustic. Caustic, you can throw down your gas. So obviously you have his tactical and his ultimate, both of which really good for reviving. If you're indoors, you can throw down his tacticals in doorways and block off the doorways and make it substantially harder for the enemies to come in for the revive. Or sorry, come in and counter you while you're reviving. Otherwise, you can throw down your ultimate, which is a giant cloud of smoke that just makes it harder for the enemies to see exactly where you are, so you get the benefits of Bangalore. But obviously, considering that it's an ultimate, you don't have it available to you as often, and it's still slightly easier to see where you are than with Bangalore. But still, regardless, you have your tactical and your ultimate, which make it difficult to see where you are, and plus, it does damage. So even if they know where you are, if they're within close proximity, they're going to take damage, which means that they might either go down or they'll leave the area, and thus that will make it so that you're more likely able to safely revive. Caustic is honestly a really good choice, definitely deserves the top of A tier, but not quite on the same level as S tier characters. So, S tier characters, give these legends the gold backpack every time, no exceptions. These characters have gadgets that directly impact your ability to revive. So all of these characters, every character that we've mentioned up until this point, their gadgets weren't specifically designed for reviving. It's just that they just so happen to make it easier for you to revive. But that wasn't the direct purpose, and it can still get countered in a number of ways. These S tier legends quite literally were designed with the ability to revive faster in mind, or with the case of Gibraltar, that was changed later, such that reviving is a core essential part of his kit. So, at the bottom of S tier, we have Newcastle. I was actually debating on whether or not I was going to put Newcastle or Lifeline at the bottom. This might be controversial. If you choose that Newcastle is better than Lifeline, I don't necessarily disagree, but hear me out with the reasons why. So with Newcastle, his sorry, give me a second. His passive, that's what I was looking for. His passive allows you to both move your teammate and use your knockdown shield to block incoming bullets. Actually very strong, genuinely very strong, absolutely one of the best revives because you can move your teammate. So if, the enemy is pushing you or your teammate's in a bad spot, you can move your teammate into a safe position while reviving them. Really strong. And you have cover with your knockdown shield. Very, very good. I don't think I need to explain the concept of that. Not only that, but you also have his tactical, which is also really good for reviving. You can throw down the tactical, like say your teammate is in a corner, you can throw down your tactical and just straight up revive in that corner. Very good for reviving. And last but not least, you have his ultimate, which is not necessarily good for reviving, but if your teammate is down, then, you can go use your fortress ability and get to them very quickly. And I know I mentioned that I don't try and count the ability to get to your teammate as a part of whether or not the reviving mechanic is good, but in this specific instance, it's just something to add on to all of his amazing benefits. So yeah, because you are launching towards your enemy, or sorry, not your enemy, towards your down teammate, and placing down a giant fortification, then you can place down your tactical, and then you also have your knockdown shield while you're reviving. Newcastle is straight up an amazing character for reviving. Why is he not at the very, very top? Well, he is defenseless and he can be countered. So the biggest thing with the knockdown shield, the biggest problem with the knockdown shield is unless if you have a purple or gold knockdown shield, your knockdown shield's going to get destroyed pretty quickly, honestly. So you can still go for the revive. But because it's whatever knockdown shield you have, if you have a weak knockdown shield, the enemies will shred through your knockdown shield and kill you or your teammate very quickly. Because, especially if you have a white knockdown shield, because you're defenseless. You can't fight back. You might have cover, but you still can't fight back. So that is one reason why he is not quite at the very tippy top. Hopefully that justifies it. If you still want to place him higher, I totally understand. But truth be told, I think that because his knockdown shield every part of his gadget can be destroyed. So his fortress can be destroyed, his tactical can be destroyed, his knockdown shield while you're reviving can be destroyed. So if the enemies are aggressively pushing you, in that specific instance, being able to revive is actually still pretty risky. That is why I put Lifeline as right above Newcastle. With Lifeline, she can use her gun while she's reviving. She can use her gadgets while she's reviving. This is really, really strong. In my opinion, this is why I put Lifeline above Newcastle, is because unlike with Newcastle, where you're still defenseless while you're going for the revive, with Lifeline, you can protect yourself and your teammates while your teammate is getting revived. Honestly, that is so strong and useful. And I know a lot of people preferred when she had the shield, but I think that's more for really skilled players who basically just use the shield as a means of blocking bullets during a gunfight rather than actually trying to use it for the purpose of reviving. But if you are in a situation where the enemies are pushing you and they are being very aggressive, being able to defend yourself is honestly super duper strong. And the fact that she's the only character that can do this it gives you the ability to still come back, right? So you, if you are Lifeline and you put your drone on a teammate to go for the revive, even if you as Lifeline go down, because your teammate is still getting revived, they can still potentially win even after Lifeline has been knocked. So there can be a situation where both of you are knocked, but your teammate can still clutch it out. That's insane. That's so good. So that is why I put Lifeline above Newcastle, is because even though Newcastle has all of this very useful stuff that makes it difficult for the enemies to attack you while reviving, you still can't defend yourself. Despite all of that, you would think that Lifeline is at the very top, but no, I still gotta give it to Gibraltar. He has a bulletproof bubble shield. It is bulletproof, it is explosive proof, and it revives faster. It literally revives teammates faster, 33% faster, in fact. It takes it from 6 seconds to 4.5 seconds, if I am correct. The fact that his gadget is literally giving you a bulletproof, explosive-proof dome of protection that allows you to revive faster than you normally can. No question. He is the #1 best reviver. And there are certain circumstances where you would rather have Lifeline than Gibraltar. There are certain circumstances where you would rather have Newcastle than Gibraltar. But in the vast majority of circumstances, especially in Battle Royale, where the engagements are pretty decently long range, being able to have bulletproof cover from all directions and revive faster is straight up the best reviver. And for that reason, he's the best reviver. Overall, I think these rankings are pretty fair. I can see where some people would disagree with certain aspects of it. But honestly, I think this ranking is very solid. If you disagree, do let me know. I'm curious to see what you guys think of my ranking. But I hope you guys enjoyed this little informational video. I hope you thought it was entertaining. I hope you thought it was thoughtful. And if you are a new player to Apex Legends, then hopefully this is actually useful in terms of if you want to be a support character who wants to be, helpful in terms of reviving your teammates, and you want to know which characters are the best and the worst, then maybe this video was actually useful for you. Thank you guys so much for watching. Take care, and peace out.